March 15, 1944. Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Adat Communications Unit, Japan. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara stared at the intercepted transmission, his third cup of bitter tea growing cold on his desk. For the past 18 hours, he and his team of Japan's finest cryptanalysts had been attempting to decode what appeared to be U.S. Marine Corps tactical communications from the Marshall Islands operation. The sounds coming through their receivers defied every analytical technique in their arsenal, besetti da decode. These weren't random noises. The patterns suggested structured military communication, timing that preceded American attacks, durations consistent with operational orders, and frequency usage that matched Marine Corps protocols. Yet the language itself remained impenetrable, unlike anything in their extensive files on Allied communications systems. Kurihara commanded one of the world's most sophisticated signals intelligence operations. The Ada facility, located 20 miles from Tokyo, employed 500 personnel operating 118 radio receivers and 20 direction finders. His cryptanalysts had successfully broken American diplomatic traffic, British naval communications, and multiple Allied Army codes. They had even penetrated the U.S. State Department's Purple Code before Pearl Harbor, providing Japan with crucial intelligence throughout the early war years. Yet these marine transmissions represented complete cryptographic failure. 3 years into the war, after breaking dozens of Allied codes, Japan's best minds could not decipher even the most basic patterns in these mysterious communications. What Kurihara did not know, what no Japanese intelligence officer would understand until after the war, was that he was listening to the only unbroken code in modern military history. The story begins not in the Pacific but in the American Southwest, where for centuries the Navajo people had preserved a language unlike any other on Earth. Diné Bizard, the Navajo language, belongs to the Athabascan language family. In 1940, it had approximately 70,000 speakers, almost entirely confined to the 27,000-square-mile Navajo reservation spanning Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The linguistic characteristics that would confound Japanese codebreakers had evolved over millennia. Navajo is fundamentally verb-centered, with actions described through complex prefix combinations that can number in the millions. The language employs 4 distinct tones, high, low, rising, and falling, that completely alter word meanings. A slight mispronunciation does not just change a word, it can render an entire sentence incomprehensible. Its phonology includes sounds absent from Japanese, English, and most world languages. Ejective stops where air explodes from the glottis, a voiceless lateral fricative that hisses like wind through teeth, and glottalized sonorants. Would you like me to continue polishing the rest of the passage into a finished chapter-style narrative, or keep it as a more historical document-style report and nasalized vowels? For Japanese speakers trained in a language with just 5 vowel sounds, accurately distinguishing these phonemes was virtually impossible. Philip Johnston understood the military potential of this linguistic fortress. Born in 1892 to a Protestant missionary on the Navajo reservation, Johnston grew up speaking Navajo fluently, one of fewer than 30 non-Navajos worldwide who could make that claim. By age 9, he was translating his father's sermons. At 15, he traveled to Washington, D.C. to interpret for Navajo leaders during a meeting with President Theodore Roosevelt. In December 1941, as America reeled from the attack on Pearl Harbor, Johnston read of Army units experimenting with Comanche speakers during training exercises in Louisiana. Choctaw had served as code talkers in World War I, but those efforts were improvised and limited. Johnston envisioned something revolutionary, a formal military code based on Navajo, unbreakable yet practical for modern warfare. On February 28, 1942, Johnston presented his proposal to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott near San Diego. The demonstration was extraordinary. 4 Navajo speakers transmitted test messages, while Marine officers timed them against standard procedures. The Navajo transmission took 20 seconds. The same message required 30 minutes using the M209 cipher machine. Impressed, General Vogel authorized a pilot program. On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits were sworn in at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. Among them were Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Benelli. These young men came from across the reservation. Some had endured boarding schools where speaking Navajo was strictly forbidden and punished. Others had grown up as traditional sheep herders, rarely leaving their ancestral lands. At Camp Elliott, the recruits worked in a locked and guarded building for 8 weeks, tasked with creating a secure military code within their native language. The challenge was immense. They had to invent terminology for concepts that did not exist in Navajo, build an alphabet system, ensure both memorability and expandability, and do it all without leaving any written records. They built the code through cultural logic. A submarine became Beshlo, iron fish swimming beneath the surface. A battleship was Loso, whale, the ocean's largest creature. Fighter planes became Dahiai-hi, hummingbirds darting through air. Bombers were J-Sho, buzzards circling before descending. The alphabet required even greater creativity. Each letter needed multiple Navajo equivalents to prevent enemy frequency analysis. The letter E, the most common in English, was assigned 4 separate alternatives. For Zay, they used Dea, elk, Anehi, Ent, Tulizi, sheep, and Behi, Dulihi, Zin. By alternating randomly between these terms, the code talkers destroyed predictable patterns. By the end of their training, the first class had developed 21 initial terms and memorized every single one. No codebooks could be risked. Everything had to be stored in memory. Would you like me to continue this in the same polished narrative style, turning the whole piece into a continuous chapter, or should I also add footnotes, annotations, so it reads more like a historical dossier? Chester Nez recalled, "We drilled endlessly. A mistake could cost lives. In our culture, words have power. Speaking correctly was sacred." The code's first real test came at Guadalcanal in August 1942. 15 Navajo Code Talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division. The Japanese had expected the invasion, having already broken other Allied communications, but suddenly, Marine tactical messages became incomprehensible. At the Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, intelligence officers scrambled to make sense of the transmissions. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, educated at Stanford before the war, reported, "The sounds are structured like language, with consistent patterns, but it matches nothing. Not English, French, Dutch, Spanish, any Philippine dialect or any Chinese dialect. Completely alien." The Japanese response was systematic. They assigned their top cryptanalysts, recorded hundreds of hours of transmissions onto wax cylinders, and applied every known analytical technique. They consulted university linguists, even Buddhist monks versed in ancient languages. Nothing worked. On November 8, 1942, Code Talker Chester Nez transmitted artillery coordinates that destroyed a Japanese machine gun nest. The 14-second transmission was intercepted, but remained meaningless noise to Japanese operators. Within minutes, American shells rained down with pinpoint accuracy. Colonel Haruo Konuma, intelligence officer for the 17th Army, wrote, "The Americans have deployed a code that defeats every attempt. We can no longer anticipate attacks. We are fighting blind." Japan's best hope lay in a captured Navajo soldier named Joe Kiyomiya, taken prisoner at Bataan in April 1942. Though fluent in Navajo, he had no knowledge of the military code being developed. When Japanese cryptographers began intercepting Navajo transmissions, they brought Kiyomiya to the interrogation center at Ona. They played him recordings of Code Talkers' messages. He recognized Navajo words, but strung together in meaningless combinations. The turtle is attacking the iron fish. The hummingbird carries eggs. When he admitted he could not translate them, his interrogators accused him of lying. The torture escalated systematically over months, but Kiyomiya could not provide what he did not know. Water torture, beatings, hanging by the arms for hours. Joe Kiyomiya endured them all. In the winter of 1943, guards forced him to stand naked in the snow until his feet froze to the ground. Starved to 90 pounds, he was offered food in exchange for translations. Through everything, Kiyomiya could only repeat the truth. He understood the words but not their military meaning. A Japanese intelligence report from May 1943 recorded their frustration. The prisoner appears native to the mystery language but cannot comprehend messages. Assessment: either extraordinary resistance, or the enemy uses a specialized code within the native language requiring specific training. The second assessment was correct. Even fluent Navajo speakers could not decipher the transmissions without code talker training. Kiyomiya survived 3.5 years of captivity. His inability to help convincing Japanese intelligence that they faced something unprecedented. By late 1943, Japan largely abandoned serious attempts to decode Navajo transmissions. Success at Guadalcanal led to immediate expansion of the program. Major General Alexander Vandergrift wrote, "The Navajo communicators have proven invaluable. Their transmissions are faster than any encoding device and absolutely secure." A formal code talker school was established at Camp Pendleton, processing new classes every 8 weeks. By war's end, between 35 and 20 Navajo Marines had served as code talkers across all 6 Marine divisions. Training was unlike anything else in Marine Corps history. Recruits practiced in soundproof booths, while instructors blasted recordings of battlefield noise. They transmitted while wearing gas masks, while running to the point of exhaustion. Thomas Begay, who enlisted at just 15, recalled, "They pushed us beyond possible. Lives depended on our accuracy." The code itself evolved continuously. New technologies and weapons required new vocabulary. The atomic bomb became Yoashiki. Metal Egg, kamikaze pilots were Nilki Natai. Death Wind. Each edition followed cultural logic to Navajo speakers, but remained incomprehensible to outsiders. By mid-1943, Japanese intelligence dedicated substantial resources to breaking the Navajo Code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section assigned 30 cryptanalysts exclusively to the problem. Captain Yoichiro Tanaka tried innovative approaches: musical analysis to identify tonal patterns, comparisons to Native American recordings, and consultation with Japanese scholars who had studied in the United States. But still, the code remained unbroken. They developed special recording equipment to slow transmissions without distorting pitch. They created visual sound representations using oscilloscopes. They applied statistical analysis to sound frequencies and patterns. Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada later revealed that they were able to identify certain features, probable call signs, correlations between message length and operational complexity, but without understanding the words themselves. These insights provided minimal value. Japanese forces eventually received explicit orders to capture Marine communication personnel alive. Rewards of 10,000 yen, equivalent to 10 years' salary, were offered for code talker equipment or materials. Several close calls occurred, but no code talker was ever captured with his equipment intact. The Central Pacific Campaign demonstrated the code talkers' growing strategic importance. At Tarawa in November 1943, 6 Navajo Marines maintained communications through 76 hours of brutal combat. Lloyd Oliver transmitted continuously for 48 hours, coordinating naval gunfire despite relentless shelling. During the Marianas Campaign, 24 code talkers operated around the clock at Saipan. Lieutenant Commander Takashi Murakawa had successfully decoded conventional Allied communications and anticipated the invasion, but once Marines landed, Japanese tactical intelligence disappeared completely. Colonel Takashi Saitao observed, "Commanders felt abandoned without the intelligence they depended upon. At Peleliu, Code Talker Jimmy King transmitted for 6 hours during a Japanese counterattack after his partner was killed. Under direct fire, he coordinated artillery from 3 battalions, sending 40 flawless messages that turned the tide of the battle. The Battle of Iwo Jima represented the Code Talkers' greatest contribution. Major Howard Connor, 5th Marine Division Signal Officer, coordinated the entire initial assault exclusively through Navajo Code. 6 Code Talkers working in teams maintained continuous communication throughout the invasion's critical first 48 hours. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had spent 2 years preparing for the defense of Iwo Jima, constructing an underground fortress with 11 miles of tunnels. His defensive strategy relied heavily on intercepting American communications to trigger timely counterattacks. That plan failed completely. Over the course of 48 hours, the 6 Navajo Code Talkers sent and received more than 800 messages without a single error. They coordinated the landing of 30,000 Marines and directed naval gunfire from over 100 ships. They coordinated close air support, tracked enemy positions, directed medical evacuations, organized supply lines, and relayed tactical orders, all while under constant fire. Major Howard Connor later testified, were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. During the first 48 hours, I had 6 Navajo radio nets operating around the clock. They sent and received over 800 messages without an error. The entire operation was directed by Navajo Code. Colonel Seizo Arisue reported to General Kuribayashi that American codes remained unbreakable. Artillery requests that could be completed in 20 seconds through Navajo would have taken 30 minutes using conventional methods. The difference between destroying enemy positions and losing them. At Okinawa, 35 Code Talkers coordinated the largest Pacific assault, 83,000 troops over 82 days. Japanese forces attempted jamming and even voice mimicry, but they could not reproduce Navajo's tonal complexity. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto's attempts to impersonate Navajo sounded, according to Code Talker Alfred Newman, like someone gargling while trying to talk. On August 14, 1945, Code Talker Teddy Draper transmitted the war's most significant message, Nashim Adigini Adani Adani's surrender. Fittingly, the message traveled first through Navajo code before being relayed over conventional channels, a symbolic end to the Code Talkers' war. After Japan's surrender, American interrogators discovered the full extent of Japanese cryptographic efforts and their complete failure. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisue, Japan's chief of intelligence, admitted, "We never broke the Marine Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, diplomatic traffic, but the Marine Tactical Code was completely secure." Captain Yasuji Kamoto was even more specific. "We recorded thousands of transmissions. Our best linguists studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked. It was our greatest cryptanalytic failure." By 1944, some Japanese analysts had correctly suspected that the language was of indigenous American origin. They requested assistance from Germany. But wartime difficulties and German ignorance of native languages prevented any breakthrough. Colonel Masao Yamada later admitted, "Our inability to read marine communications cost thousands of lives." Every Marine operation after 1942 was a mystery until it began. Major Hiroshi Tanaka, who survived Iwo Jima, described the psychological toll. "We couldn't understand their words. It made us feel primitive, defeated before battle even began." But for the Navajo Code Talkers, the war's end did not end their burden. The program remained classified for potential Cold War use. Code Talkers returned home unable to discuss their service with anyone. They returned to states that still denied them voting rights until 1948 in New Mexico and Arizona, and 1957 in Utah. Hotels and restaurants refused them service. They were heroes who could not reveal their heroism. Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, who died in 2014, reflected, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but couldn't tell anyone. The burden was heavy. Many veterans sought healing through traditional ceremonies. The enemy way ceremony purified warriors from the spiritual contamination of warfare." Dan Urke explained, "We had used our language to direct death. We needed it for healing. The ceremonies reminded us our language was sacred." In 1968, the program was finally declassified. The first public recognition came in 1969 at a 4th Marine Division reunion. President Ronald Reagan declared August 14, 1982 as National Navajo Code Talkers Day. The most significant recognition came on July 26, 2001, when President George W. Bush presented Congressional Gold Medals to the original 29 in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Only 5 survived to attend. Bush declared, "Today we honor 29 Native Americans who gave their country a service only they could give." Chester Nez responded, "We were ordinary men given an extraordinary task. We used our sacred language to help win the war." While the Navajo are most famous, 14 other tribes also provided code talkers. The Choctaw had pioneered the concept in World War I. In World War II, 17 Comanches served in Europe, landing at D-Day. Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, and others contributed their languages. The Code Talkers Recognition Act of 2008 finally acknowledged all tribes. John Brown Jr. observed, "They told us our language was no good, then they needed it to win the war." The code demonstrated the sophistication of Native American languages. Code Talkers modernized Navajo in real time, creating grammatical constructions and adapting metaphors for military purposes. Its agglutinative nature allowed complex ideas to be expressed in single words. What required paragraphs in English could be transmitted in brief Navajo phrases. Dr. William Morgan concluded, "They proved indigenous languages aren't primitive. They showed Navajo could express anything from ceremonies to warfare." The Navajo Code introduced cultural encryption, security through linguistic barriers no mathematics could overcome. This insight influenced post-war intelligence operations and remains relevant today as quantum computing threatens conventional mathematical encryption. Colonel David Hatch evaluated their achievements succinctly. They achieved something unique. A code never broken, never compromised. It proved human linguistic capability could exceed mechanical encryption. By the 1980s, Japanese scholarship began to examine their failure. Professor Tao Yoshikawa revealed that 30 cryptanalysts had worked exclusively on Navajo transmissions for 2 years, consulting multiple universities. Captain Minoru Yamada admitted, "We knew it was Native American by late 1943 but couldn't identify which language." Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Fukumoto reflected with candor, "Using a native language was so simple, so elegant, we never considered it." In the 1990s, photographer Kenji Kawano documented surviving code talkers. His exhibitions in Tokyo and Hiroshima introduced Japanese audiences to their story. Code talker Albert Smith told them, "We were both warriors. My language helped defeat you, but now it helps us understand each other." In 2010, at a Japanese Association of Intelligence Studies symposium, Admiral Hiroaki Abe reflected, "The Navajo Code represents perfect encryption. We had Asia's best code breakers, yet we were completely defeated." On June 4, 2014, Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, passed away. Today, only 2 code talkers survive from the roughly 400 who served: Thomas H. Begay and Peter MacDonald. Though not among the original 29, both were central to the code's wartime success. Speaking at age 96, MacDonald reminded America, "We showed that America's strength comes from diversity. Our different languages and cultures make us stronger." The Navajo language, once suppressed, is now recognized as strategically vital. Federal funding initiatives reference the Code Talker story, and young Native Americans study their ancestral languages with renewed pride. Historian Dr. Jennifer Dennett-Dale observed, "Code Talkers transformed how Native Americans see themselves and how America sees Native Americans. They proved our languages aren't museum pieces, but living resources." The Navajo Code Talkers achieved one of military history's most remarkable feats, creating an unbreakable code that defied Japanese intelligence throughout World War II. Between 35 and 420 Navajo Marines served, transmitting tens of thousands of messages under combat conditions without a single error. Yet their deeper significance lies in what they represented. Native Americans used a language the U.S. government once tried to eradicate to defend that same nation. Young men from marginalized communities provided capabilities even America's strongest allies could not match. Japan's failure was not merely tactical, it was ideological. The empire prepared to defeat American technology, but not American diversity. They could not comprehend a strength rooted in cultures and languages outside their reach. The same racial superiority they proclaimed blinded them to the very factor that helped defeat them. As Lieutenant General Arisue admitted, Japan never cracked the Marine Code. In truth, it was more than a code. It was a cultural inheritance weaponized for survival, an encryption forged not by machines but by human diversity. The Navajo Code Talkers proved that America's greatest strength was not only industrial might, but human variety. Boarding schools once tried to erase Navajo. Instead, it became the key to victory in the Pacific. Today, as the last Code Talkers pass into history, their legacy endures. The once forbidden language is taught with pride. Native veterans are honored for serving at the highest per capita rates of any group. The doctrine that diversity strengthens security is now accepted military wisdom. Across Pacific battlefields, the voices speaking Navajo carried more than orders, they carried a transcendent truth. America's strength comes from many voices, peoples and languages united in purpose yet strengthened by differences. The unbroken code proved that differences are not weaknesses but strengths to be celebrated, preserved, and deployed for freedom. Japanese intelligence officers who failed to break it understood its magnitude. Some codes are unbreakable not through mathematical complexity, but through the infinite complexity of human culture itself. The Navajo Code Talkers sent messages Japan never decoded, but their greatest message was universal. Diversity brings strength, culture brings power. Indigenous knowledge serves modern purposes. Young Navajo men, using their sacred language as both a weapon and later an instrument of peace, proved forever that America's greatest encryption is its diversity, unbreakable because it emerges from limitless human experience and wisdom. The unbroken code still lives today, in every native child who speaks an ancestral language with pride, in every recognition that minority contributions strengthen national identity, and in every reminder that our differences make us stronger together. The Code Talkers proved eternally that many voices, many peoples, many languages, united yet diverse, create the unbreakable code of freedom itself.